ladies and gentlemen. There seems to be a lurking notion that skills and knowledge, or what we call education, are two separate and separable entities. I like to believe it is not. Skills happen from the day the child is born. So therefore, I do think that if you need skills, you need a good quality base of knowledge and education, and without which an overlay of skills is not possible. And no knowledge, no education is complete without skills. So I do think that they run parallelly and concurrently right from day one. And I do think that we need to look at education and skills in a more integral way rather than as two separate entities that we need to address at different times in the life of a child. Having said that, I'd also like to share with you that the quality of skills is very largely dependent on the quality of fundamental basic education. And that is what India seems to be struggling with, of course, at both levels, at the knowledge of education, at the level of knowledge, and also at the level of skills. Just to quote to you the 2015 USSR report, you must have heard of the Annual Survey of Education report, the Annual Status of Education report, that says that a class 5 student cannot read the text meant for class 2. The class 8 student cannot attempt the mathematics or the arithmetic, the simple arithmetic meant for class 5 or class 4. 67 years into independence, in fact 68 now, we still seem to be struggling with the most fundamentals of education. Now, we all know that. I'm only repeating what you already know. But what I'd like to share with you briefly in the short time window that I have is what is it that we do about it? And my answers are, having spent 35 years in the education sector and some of it in the government, and having seen education from both vantage points, I can safely assume that the soul of teaching, learning, rests in the teacher. It is the quality of teacher that we need to address. Quite unfortunately, starting from the very beginning, our education sector, for whatever reasons, historical, structural, policy or otherwise, our education system does not attract the best university graduates to teaching. That's a hard reality. Just to support this, just to illustrate this, one of the leading brand of schools recently advertised for teachers. We received 6,000 applications. And when I looked at the scores, the average scores of the 6,000 applicants in class 10 and class 12, they were in the region of 47% to 49%. Now, you know what it means to score 49% in class 10 or 47% in class 12. Now, that is the average score that there was of 6,000 applicants. Now, if these are the people who become teachers, you can imagine the quality of education that they can impart. Now, I'm not saying that there are exceptions to the rule. There are. But then largely, that is the kind of people that we're looking at who join the education sector as teachers. At the next level, are teacher preparation programs. Less said the better. You know about NCTE, and I don't mind sharing that with you. Ever since they've been in existence since the early 90s, they have only contributing in making it more messier than ever. Today, every teacher has a B.Ed, but cannot stand in a classroom. Has neither the knowledge, nor the skill, nor the inspiration, nor the commitment. But then, as mercenaries and wage earners, they fulfill a given duty. And that's just about it. And we are trusting our children to them. You go to the next level, there is no in-service teacher development programs available in this country. And if there are any, they're more of an eyewash. And finally, the most critical factor in education that can simply turn it around is the point of leadership. We don't have school leaders. Some of you who run schools, I don't know, some people raised hands, who runs K-12 schools? Are there people amongst the audience who run K-12 schools? Or the higher education? You can't find faculty. You can't find leaders. You can't find principals. It's so hard to find one. And you know, schools being a close community of teachers and learners are very highly dependent on one person called the principal. So we need competent managers, we need competent leaders, we need inspiring leaders. We don't have them. So unless we set this right, we really have no future. What is very worrisome is, and of course I'll dwell on that later, is that today 31% of the enrollments across the country, which includes rural areas, have gone to the private sector. The government schools across the country are only about 69%. And this enrollment over the years has been progressively tilting in favor of the private schools, good or bad, whatever quality they be, yet they are preferred to a government school. 31%. And when you go to the secondary segment of school education or in the urban segment of school education, the private sector enrollment goes as high as 75% in the metros. How many of you send your children to a government school? Can anyone? Please tell. There are no senders to the government schools. It's only those who have no choice are the ones who have to send them to the government schools. No, that's not a very good state. Why should the government schools be as efficient as the private schools? So I like to share with you as to why are we witnessing this phenomena. The reasons are quite simple, very apparent. Number one, the government as a provider of education, and I'll say without hesitation, has very largely failed. And this phenomena is not only confined to India. Even in the US, which once upon a time was an icon, even there is a massive shift away from the public schools. It depends really what's the neighborhood that you live in. But private schools are doing far better across the world. Now this is a phenomena which is also prevalent in Europe and in other advanced countries. Governments are not able to cope up with the requirement of providing quality schooling because there is no accountability at any level. There is no system of review. There is no system of applying correctives. And the whole thing has been reduced to a trade union. Now, can we trust the future of a generation into such inefficient hands? So government as a provider has very largely failed. Government as a regulator. Wherever government has come into regulation, it's created problems. The moment government steps back, take the classical case of the telecom industry. Just because the government took long to realize what's happening, meantime the telecom industry had matured. But imagine if there was a regulator at the very beginning, I can guarantee you telecom would still be as difficult as it was. When I first moved to Delhi, I remember I had to get a landline connection way back in 1983 and I had to go looking for a friend who was in the department of telecom and request him to a temporary connection de do. And a great favor, a temporary connection was given. Today anybody can go and walk in and take a connection, as many as you want. So this revolution is only possible when what Mr. Narendra Modi has been saying, more governance, less government. This government must resort to that, must accept that as a reality, and it's a reality not only in India but worldwide. That's the only way the education sector can go. The private sector has been facing enormous difficulties. Ghaziabad, Gurgaon, Jaipur, Chennai, in almost every other city, there are parent associations which are rising up in arms. I would say, why should the government come in to regulate fees? What business does the government have to regulate fees? And who's to decide? And the kind of corrupt practices that take place at the time of when you have to go to the regulatory committee, the kind of money that needs to be exchanged and the kind of time delays that there are, who is responsible? Why are we killing the golden goose? Somebody who's laying the egg. Private schools are doing a good job. Yes, they need to be cleansed of some of the malpractices that may be in the private schools, but I think over time that will also be taken care of. Some minimal intervention by the government may perhaps be in order, but not excessively. So government needs to regulate less, but enable more. At the third level, government as a policy maker. I don't know how many of you have read the National Policy of Education 1986 and then revised in 1992. I went through every single comma, full stop, and every working paper that was submitted before this policy came into being. And I'm sad to say that almost 30 years later, 86 and now 2015, the policy largely remains unimplemented. I'm not even sure if it's correctly aligned with the needs of the modern day, the modern business, the modern employer. So, what about policy? Although I am told that there's a new policy draft which is up on the web, and then people have been requested to give their views, I would urge you that you must do that. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are the two things I would want and I would like to see the private sector in education behave more responsibly and cleanse itself out any malpractices if there be any. At another level, I would request the government to leave them alone. You know, if you're good, the market will decide to come to you. If you're not, your school will be empty. So let the market decide. Market is the best regulator. Let the parents decide as to where do they wish to go, what fee do they wish to pay. Why is it the people pay $9,000 a year in the University of Florida and pay $80,000 in Harvard? They make their choices. Allow people to make choices. Let the government become less restrictive. Let more private enterprise, let more private money come into education. You know, way back in 2009, 2010, the Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh, announced from the ramparts of the Lal Killa that 6,000 model schools along the lines of the Kendriya Vidyalayas will be set up. I was aghast. I moved every single thing that I could to ensure that this does not take off, because why should the government, by those estimates, spend 48,000 crore of public money on building 6,000 buildings of non-performing schools? Instead, I emphasized, let the private players come in, let anybody set up a school anywhere. Let the government say, all right, I will nominate so many students to your school, and depending on their ability to clear the third-party assessment, I will pay you so much of money. And let all of that be done electronically. Let no school have to go submit papers and prefer claims. Eventually, it is not me who thwarted it. It is the whole lack of logic of this program that eventually saw the demise of this program of 6,000 government schools. I'm happy to share with you that barring a few states who have put up some kind of a sprinkling of these schools, largely this program never took off. The point that I'm making is, let the government become a minimal regulator and a policy maker and allow operations in the hands of the private sector or the private providers, and ensure that there's a complete fair play with a minimal amount of intervention or control. I think that's the way to go. And to finally conclude, most often I see in conferences, people do spout out their wisdom on the poor, hapless audience who have no choice but to suffer them while they stand on the podium and speak. But I've taken that a step further. In whatever I say, I'm not trying to prove it. I'd like to share with you the launch of a program. Because when I was talking to you about the quality of teachers, then I am not going to leave it there. The question is, what is it that I am doing about it? And what I'm sharing with you is that we have launched a program wherein we are spotting best of the university graduates and drawing them into teaching profession. We're starting a program which is titled Talent and Excellence in Education, wherein we picked up some bright postgraduates from the University of Delhi, University of Punjab, JNU, Jamia, and other universities around. And we are putting them through a one-year-long, very rigorous program, paying them a stipend of 25,000 rupees to the young graduates, postgraduates, and assuring them a job in the 6th pay commission with a starting salary of at least 5 lakhs a year. And that, ladies and gentlemen, did the trick, because I then found a lot of interest in people wanting to become teachers. These are all 90%ers who've done very well across their educational careers. Now, I do see that someday when we're able to present this first lot as a pilot project, we might be able to inspire lots of other people to be able to undertake and commission such projects. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.